There are lots of ways to study the Bible, lots of methods out there. Today, we're going to dig into 5 of them. We're going to dig into the pros and cons of each one of them. One of them, I don't think there really are any cons to that one, but we're going to dig into it and I'll tell you a little bit more about it soon. Before we get started, I want to preface all of this by saying that to everything, there is a season. So bookmark this, because what works right now may not work 6 months from now. And I want you to be able to have this as a reference so that you can come back to it. If you if you fall off and you want to get back on the wagon again, you're going to want to have this video as a reference. So the very first thing that we're going to get to is checklists. When I was younger, this worked great for me because I really enjoyed looking back and seeing all my notebook pages where I took notes and I was in my study time on Sunday mornings, on Wednesday nights, all of that. I just loved going in and seeing that I hadn't missed a day, that I hadn't missed a time making a connection with God, and I had a written record of all of it. So the checklist worked really well. But then as I got busy when I got older and I started to miss some days, I fell off the checklist wagon, so to speak, and it became something that just didn't work for me any longer. So some of the pros of checklists are that you can feel a sense of accomplishment. You can look back and you can see all the connections that you've made with these different scriptures. And some of the cons are that, if you're the type of person like me, I didn't like those glaring places where there was just a missing space that I hadn't made that connection that day, and it just bothered me. So I just didn't try as hard. But I mean, maybe you're one of those people that aren't like me, and that's empowering, and you just want to dig in even harder. I don't know. At the end of the day, it's what works best for you. That's the best method out there. So number 2, the next one we're going to go over, the next method is having an accountability partner. Now, one of the things that I have found with this is having more than one other person really works really well, because if you forget to call the other person, they forget to call you, then there's this awkward time where you're like, should I call them or should they call me? Should I just wait? But if there are 3 people, oftentimes that just goes right out the window, because you guys are going to get together and it's just better if you can have more than one person. Now, I'm not knocking having one accountability partner. One is better than none, but it's really a neat idea if you guys can get together for coffee. If there's a group of you, it works really well. Now, the third way that you can study the Bible, the third method, is to study out your Sunday sermon. The one that you took notes on, you got every Bible reference written down, and you go home and you mine the depths of that Sunday sermon, because they didn't just sit down and, preach something from somebody else. They have a connection and a reason that they brought this before their congregation. Your pastor is the shepherd, and they want to bring a solid word to you. And I'd be willing to bet that there's a lot more in there that you can mine the depths of than just what they could get across to you from the pulpit that Sunday morning. So it's very, very important to take it home and study it out, because really, these are human beings. They hear from the Lord, and that is incredibly important. But you need to make sure that you're not just taking anybody's word for it. Also, one of the things that I've noticed, sometimes things will hit a person's ears and they'll think that a pastor has said something, but they haven't actually said it in the way that that person took it. Because we have a tendency to hear things through our preconceived notions. Sometimes our pain, our history will come in and we'll think that they've said something that they haven't actually said. So when you go home and you study those notes, then you can make sure that you are rightly dividing the truth. So number 4, our fourth method is books, concordances, and study materials everywhere. Beautiful mind style. Mortified, stupefied by you. So, I've really enjoyed this, because to me, sitting down and making connections with all of these different things, having multiple Bibles so that you can study what it says in one, the KJV versus the Message or something along those lines. When you can sit down and you can see all of these different connections, it's just really cool. And then your concordance will help you dig into the Greek and the Hebrew. There's so much that you can pull out, and that one is my absolute favorite method. But the fifth method that I don't want to leave out, because I think that in some seasons it can be the most important, it's however you can squeeze it in. Like audio Bible right before you're falling asleep. If that is a way that you can create a habit, that is going to be probably the most important. So don't belittle the however you can squeeze it in method. Really, don't belittle that, because to everything there is a season. Really, give yourself some grace sometimes. You're going to need that, because the most important thing, the thing that will tie together any method in any season of your life, is having a habit of making a connection with God. No matter what book of the Bible you're reading and no matter what verse you're stuck on, you're making a connection with God and creating that habit. Because over the years, I've created a habit such that if I go to bed without reading, without making a connection with God, I can't fall asleep. And so I will rehearse scriptures that I have memorized as I'm falling asleep. And that's the thing that helps me fall asleep. I'll be going over, in the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God, the same was in the beginning with God. All things were made by Him, and without Him was not anything made that was made. There was a man. I just start going through John, or I might go through Exodus 20. There are just things that I will go over and over in my mind, because really having that habit of connection with God is so important to me. I know that no matter how many times I go over John, there's always going to be more to it that I haven't gotten through. And so when I'm quiet and I'm laying in bed and I'm connecting with God, I can make even more connections in that moment. So that habit is really, really important. So that's key number one that will make sure all of these methods work for you at whatever given season that you're in. But the second key to making sure that any method works for you is having a why that is bigger than your quit. What I mean by that is the devil's going to try to make you quit. And the reason why you study the Bible has to be bigger than the reason why he wants you to quit. Because he wants you to quit for so many reasons we don't even need to get into it. He's a liar, he's a deceiver, he's under your feet, but he's going to try to come and he's going to try to get you to stop reading the Bible. And it's so important that your why is bigger than whatever the devil is going to try to whisper in your ear. Because when I was younger and I thought that those glaring days that I missed were a really big reason for me to quit, I just didn't have a really big why. And I also didn't have that habit of connection that I thought that I had. I was just counting on, those checklists and everything. I thought that it made me a good Christian. I was a kid and I didn't really know a whole lot about it. And since then I've made a connection with God, the most important thing in my Bible study. And it's become a habit. So the why that I have, if this will help you kind of dig in and figure out what your reason for studying the Bible is, to me, I've studied history and I've seen what it was like when they didn't have the Bible in print, and the lies that they were susceptible to and the things that they didn't know were being crammed down their throat and being told to them as truth. And it wasn't. It was a blatant lie. The Bible never said what they were being told it said. I don't want that to happen in my children's lifetime. That's a really big why for me. Now, we're sort of facing a little bit of that today, because I've told you guys in a previous video, and I'll link to that, we only have 1% of Christians, not just 1% of the population, 1% of Christians, Bible-believing Christians, reading their Bible daily. So that means that we're sort of in that, because we have Bibles, they're readily available, but Christians can be lied to because they don't read their Bible. So that's a really, really big why for me. I don't want to be lied to. I want to make sure that all the connections that I've made, if somebody's telling me something, I know because I've heard the voice of my daddy God that it's not correct. I read it in my Bible for myself, and I know, no, the Bible doesn't say what you're telling me it says. So I really challenge you to have a habit of making a connection with God. That's key number one to making sure any method will work for you. And key number two is having a why that's bigger than your quit. Because there's going to be lots of reasons to quit. Having a really big why, that is going to that's going to root you, it's going to ground you, and it's going to keep you coming back for more and mining the depths of every sermon, every verse, every truth that you hear, making sure that you can dig in and understand more and more of God every single day.